Good evening, ALC small groups. My name is Pastor Jared Pollard. I'm so excited to be with you guys tonight, all week long in the Sunday sermon, in the podcast, and now here on the small group teaching. We have been talking about worship. And tonight, what we want to talk about is how to keep yourself from wasting your worship on meaningless things. Big title, really big title. Before we get there, I wanted to talk about a couple of things. My lovely wife, when we first got married, did an amazing thing. In secret, she went and purchased my dream guitar and paid it off leading up to my college graduation and gave it to me. It was an amazing moment. I have never received a gift where I legitimately cried. And I cried in that moment when she gave me the guitar. It's the guitar that I lead worship on our Sunday services and all over today. That's the guitar that I use. And it was such a blessing to me, and now it's a blessing to everybody else. But what my wife had to do in that process was decide, was I worth it? That sounds like a strong statement, and she'll be watching this teaching and poking at me for saying that. But was I worth it? Was it worth getting me that level of an instrument? It's a very, very nice guitar, one of 200 made that are just like that guitar. So it's also, hard to find another one. And so she had to decide, is it worth it? Similarly, a couple years into our marriage, during the fast, I felt that the Lord brought up to me to upgrade my wife's wedding ring. This was not something that I was planning on. I didn't think it was something that I could afford. Wasn't really looking to do that. But throughout the year, the Lord just kept bringing that back to me. We do our fast in January. And so throughout the year, the Lord just kept bringing that back to me. And it made it possible for me to upgrade. When my wife and I got married, we were very poor. We made $16,000 our first year of marriage, to give a picture of what was going on. And so she was so gracious to me for accepting my proposal for the tiny ring that I offered to her. But then the Lord positioned to where I had the opportunity to almost quadruple the size of the diamond that was in her ring. And it's not like I have the money of Fort Knox or anything. It was a sacrificial move for me to do so. And I had to contemplate the question, was it worth it? Was it worth upgrading her ring? The same thing happened when we had a kid. When your kid is born, they have all sorts of personalities. And if you've met our daughter Everly, you know that she has all sorts of personality. But when she was first born, she didn't know what her room looked like. She didn't know the things that we had done to set up her nursery, to make it feel comfortable, to make it feel safe. And all along the way, we had to answer the question, was it worth it? Now, you might be sitting there thinking, is Jared crazy? Why is he saying, are these things worth it? Because the obvious answer is yes, all of these things were 100% worth it. But this is the question that I want us to be contemplating on, to be thinking on, of was it worth it? And while we're doing that, we're going to look at a passage. This is in Mark chapter 14, starting in verse 3, and it says this. And while he was at Bethany, he being Jesus, while he was at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, as he was reclining at table, a woman came with an alabaster flask of ointment of pure nard, very costly, and she broke the flask and poured it over his head. There were some who said to themselves indignantly, why was the ointment wasted like that? For this ointment could have been sold for more than 300 denarii and given to the poor. And they scolded her. But Jesus said, leave her alone. Why do you trouble her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. For you always have the poor with you, and whenever you want, you can do good for them. But you will not always have me. She has done what she could. She has anointed my body beforehand for burial. And truly I say to you, wherever the gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in memory of her. I don't know how much you've thought about this passage. This is a passage that I think about a lot. Because as we're walking through life and as we're living out our faith, we have to constantly evaluate, is it worth it? Are the things that we do, the work that we do, the volunteering that we do, the giving that we do, is it worth it? And we're constantly answering that question. And so what I want to do, I just want to give 3 simple tips that'll help make sure that we're not wasting our worship. And these are things that Mary, the woman that they're talking about in this passage, I believe had correct in her life. And the first thing is to stay focused. Stay focused. Jesus has to be the center. He has to be the main portion of your focus. He has to be what is straight ahead for you. He has to be where you're headed. He has to be what you think about. He has to be what you dwell on. He has to be your focus. And I think about Galatians 2:20 when I think about focus. It says, I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. So to make sure that we're not wasting our worship, we have to stay focused. Then we have to stay intentional. Mary intentionally, she didn't drop the flask. She intentionally took something that was worth what today would be tens of thousands of dollars, and she poured it over Jesus' head and poured it on his feet and wiped his feet with her hair. It was intentional. She knew exactly what she was doing. And so I often think about these passages. Psalm 119, verses 10 through 11, it says, with my whole heart I seek you. Let me not wander from your commandments. I have stored up your word in my heart that I might not sin against you. And then James 4:8, it says, draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Stay intentional. Staying intentional is an extension of the focus on Jesus. It's not just that I'm thinking about Jesus, it's that I am acting on all of these things throughout my day. And then my last thing is to stay sacrificial. So we talked about the intentionality. Mary knew what she was doing when she was breaking open that flask to pour over Jesus' head and to pour over his feet. She was sacrificial. She was giving away what was going to be an inheritance at that point. It was probably her inheritance. And she poured it on the feet of Jesus. Some might say she wasted it on the feet of Jesus. But in her mind, it was worth it. And not only in her mind, Jesus' words confirmed that it was worth it. Now, if you try to look at it from a worldly perspective, which they did in this passage, you would find, you'd probably be questioning, is it worth it? But what she was doing was, in her sacrifice, she was saying, Jesus, you are worth more than any inheritance that I have. You are worth more than anything that I can accomplish. Because the reality is that there is no success apart from Jesus. There is nothing that is worth it apart from Jesus. There is no job, there is no career, there is no relationship that is worth it apart from Jesus. It's not just a focus of whatever Jesus requires, I will give him. That's a good place to start. But we have to get to the point of abandon and surrender where we say, all of me, every part of me belongs to Jesus. That's where Mary was at. She stayed focused on Jesus. She stayed intentional in her worship with Jesus. And she stayed sacrificial. Now, I did this quickly, a little bit on purpose, because I don't want to just direct the conversation in a specific way. I want you guys as a group to discuss each of these points and to be vulnerable with each other, because we're made to worship, and we're going to worship something. And so tonight or today, whatever time you guys are doing this video, what we want to accomplish is focusing, being intentional, and being sacrificial in our worship to Jesus at all times. I love you guys. I hope this teaching blessed you, and I pray that you have a good night. We'll see you guys later.